This is a speaker I built using simple tools and materials. It's functional, low cost, and something you can create too. It's powered by a USB and sounds better than my Bose. It started off as a simple design in SolidWorks. I quickly found myself cutting it, assembling the electronics, and finishing it into a final product. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built the speaker so you can build one of your own. Also, make sure you follow and like this video. I am trying to grow this YouTube video, so it would help out greatly. Let's get going. Go. Starting with 1/4 inch maple planks, I cut them to width. And then I cut a small chamfer on the edge of them. And I had to do this twice. The next part was to make a groove for a piece of walnut, which fit very nicely.
So our profile is made. We have the groove that the walnut is going to fit into, and a groove on the back for, like the back panel.
The next step was to use a miter gauge to cut all the sides off for the stereo box. I measured them out very precisely and cut all the sides out. I was able to use the mark on the miter gauge to make sure that all the cuts were accurate. Now that we have all these sides cut out, I am going to cut out the faceplate and the back plate. Just like the maple, I cut the walnut piece to the thickness that I needed. And I cut the back plate to the same exact width because I did the same exact height cut. Next, I placed a stop on my crosscut sled. If you are interested in building this crosscut sled, I'll leave a link right here. So once again, I made the same cut to the piece of 1/8 inch plywood that I'll be using for the back panel. The next step was to go through and precisely measure out where I wanted to have the speaker holes. I then used a 2-inch drill to cut out those holes. And that thing fell off. No biggie. So I went through and made sure I could finish the cut, and they came out nice and clean. I drilled a small hole in the front so that I could adjust the volume on the speaker. Then I clamped it down and routed out the edges just so it looked a lot more finished and didn't have just a harsh line on there. And this will be the knob. I then did a quick pre-sand before I assembled everything. To sand the inside of the rounds, I just used some sandpaper, and then I went through and placed all the electronic parts, the USB charger and the auxiliary cable. Just did a quick stampy stamp. Drilled out as much as I could. And then finish it off with a nice old chisel. I shouldn't say nice. I got them from Harbor Freight, but they work pretty well for everything I've done so far. So I just did that to both sides. Bump. Now the moment of truth. Do they fit in there nicely? I want to pick the nicer side, obviously. All right, the USB-C port comes out very nicely. And here we go. And so does the auxiliary cable port. Without going into too much details on how to solder and all the steps to get a good solder joint, all I did was connect the terminals to where they needed to go, right to right, left to left for the speakers, the inputs, and the power cable. If you need more information, you can find a great video on YouTube, so I recommend starting there if you need information on that. Finally, to test the speakers out, Now that we know that the speakers sound good and I don't have to do any wire work, I can start assembling them. All I used was some hot glue to put on the speakers and the volume knob slash amplifier, which, by the way, I will leave a link in the comments for everything I purchased for this project. Let's give it a quick test to make sure that it spins freely. And it sure does. The next step is obviously to start assembling. Now, I'm going to be honest that this assembly was a pretty big pain in the butt. It was not the easiest. The wood was just so ever so slightly bowed, so it made assembling and getting the corners nice and tight a little bit difficult. But having enough clamps easily solved that issue, and I was able to get a nice looking speaker at the end. Then I just sanded it down, just with some 220, making sure to keep it simple. And I finished it with a little bit of mineral oil. Just, the laxative thyme from CVS. If you made this far, thanks for watching, and make sure to follow me.